I just realized the moment that I fired up the camera, I got so excited about putting the wheels on, I put them on backwards. You can see the the brake rotors are facing outward instead of inward, so that's not going to work. But yes, I was excited to get to this stage just to see this part come together and have that confirmation that this is actually going to work. So there was a little bit of concern over ground clearance because we're conjoining these two disparate pieces of trike that were not meant to go together. But now that we see it on a level surface, you can see, yeah, ground clearance, we're good to go in that department. So anyway, yes, very exciting to see it come to this point. Now, putting the wheels on, well, that was quick and easy. The speed bump that we're up against now is getting the seat mounted. Because we're recycling the seat that was part of the TerraTrike, that mounting method was dependent on these triangular brackets. But the mounting method that this frame uses, we need a clean tube without these brackets in the way because that tube rests in this little cradle on this frame. So that seems like a good job for an angle grinder to start with, and then we'll just have to get creative from there as far as how we ground off the rest of it and clean it up. So that's going to throw a lot of sparks, and I don't want to melt my seat, this nail-on seat. So step one is going to be removing the mesh seat from the frame, and we'll get cracking. All right, well, so there's a little more polishing to do, but that certainly is the bulk of it. You saw a little bit of a time lapse there, of course, but this whole thing probably took me 25 minutes. Brett probably has a less barbaric way of doing what you just saw, but you know, I couldn't let him have all the fun. All right, so before I put the mesh back on the seat frame, let's just drop it in here so we all understand how this goes together. Now the diameter feels like it's a little bit off. This is pretty big around compared to the diameter of the tubing of this frame. I don't know if this manufacturer uses a larger diameter tubing for their seat frames or not, but you also have these special clamps that go around here on both sides to hold it in place. So I think we'll be fine once we add those. Okay, folks, crudeness abounds. Crude because I'm shooting this with my phone just to get the point of view, and also crude because of the way that I've got this mocked up. We have a piece of closet rod duct tape to the boom that we are scavenging from the TerraTrike that needs to be adapted so it can work with this trike frame. So the current length that I have this cut at, I feel like if I butt those together or thereabouts, that actually ends up being pretty close to my reach, to my inseam. So I think what we've got is enough information based on that to work from, that if we cut this tube back a little bit further so that the concentric tube that we put up inside has enough room for adjustability to come in even further for someone a little bit shorter than me. And then of course that concentric tube that we put up inside here will be long enough that it goes deep enough into here that there will be plenty of adjustability to extend the whole works out even longer for someone a wee bit taller than me. So now we have the missing piece of information to be able to finish the bit of fabrication that we need to do in the front that we didn't have last time when we did the adaptation for the back. Now, there was a little bit of the final work to do with the fabrication of the boom. I wasn't able to be present for the welding mainly, but suffice it to say they did finish the boom for me, which means that the last of the fabrication is done. They did such a fantastic job. Really grateful for my friends over there at EVT, and really enjoyed the field trip. I hope you guys did too. But with that, we have transitioned from EVT headquarters back to He Said, She Said headquarters. We're back here in my wood shop. Now, I chose to spare you from sitting through the majority of this next step in the project because right up there with watching paint dry, ranking as boring things, I feel like watching someone strip paint from something is even worse. Now, in this case, it's not technically paint, it is powder coat, which is a very different animal. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the video. So as you're able to conclude, yes, I was a little bit on the fence about painting this frame all one color. But as you can see, I have committed to that path because I've actually got most of it stripped. So there's a couple of ways to remove paint or powder coat from something. One of them is sandblasting or bead blasting. I don't happen to have the equipment for that, so I decided to go the chemical route. Now, I did do just a little bit of homework online before I got started with this. It turns out that the main active ingredient that you want in a product for stripping powder coat from something should be methylene chloride. So I went to my local hardware store. They happen to carry this Rust-Oleum product that's referred to as aircraft remover. Now, personally, I kind of think their marketing people should maybe take a fresh look at this and rethink the packaging. I don't know about you, but I find it to be a little bit misleading. I mean, how does that work? You can pour this on your Cessna and it disappears. But anyway, apparently this product is capable of removing aircraft. But along with that, it's doing a pretty good job at removing the the powder coat as well. Now, it turns out that this doesn't have methylene chloride. This has what's called methyl acetate, is like the first ingredient on the list. So I think that's like the main actor here, the main active ingredient. So it's working. Methylene chloride, I don't know, maybe it works even better. So the directions say you glob this on, brush it in one direction, and you leave it on for 20 to 45 minutes, and then you can start scraping it off. To get this far, it's taken like multiple applications. In other words, I've had to goober it on, and I'm able to get some of it off, but then I'll have to come back to the very same area, goober it on again to get even more of it off. So it's taken multiple passes to get to where you see that I am here. Now, what has surprised me about this product, and I'm not complaining, it's nasty enough to eat through the powder coat, but for whatever reason, it hasn't eaten my brush. I even left the brush out overnight and didn't even make an attempt to clean it, and I expected the brush to be just a disposable thing, and I would need to go and get a different one. For some reason, the brush is still intact. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining. It was just a happy thing. I totally expected that brush to be like just a little pile of mush. So note to self, you can remove aircraft with it, but you can't remove paintbrushes with it. Anyway, so I've probably got another good solid hour's worth of work here to get this thing like totally cleaned up and detailed and just down to the bare metal absolutely everywhere. And then you and I are going to take another little field trip. All right, so I'm sharing a microphone today. It's a little noisy, but I told you we'd have another field trip. We are at Color FX Powder Coating in Portland, Oregon. So powder coat isn't paint. How does it work?
Powder coat is literally powder ground about the fineness of like flour.
Flour, wow.
And then it's electrostatically applied. There's a charge on the powder, and the part that's hanging from the cart is grounded, and then it electrostatically applies to it. It's not quite that simple. You still have to have technique and make sure you get good coverage, but that's the end of it. Then you roll it into the oven and cook it.
Oh, and he's
And
pointing
that-
to the oven over here. I'll shoot that in a moment, but yeah.
And that, for lack of a better term, melts it on.
Melts it on. So it's a lot sturdier than paint.
Yes, much sturdier and much more flexible
Yeah.
than most paints.
And so in the process of stripping it off, I used a chemical stripper. It was like plastic. It was like little shavings of plastic
Yes.
that I was getting off.
Yeah.
So what's the coolest thing you've ever shot?
We do a lot of artwork,
Huh.
and that's kind of cool to do sometimes. We do a company called Echo Mobile, which things that hang from the ceiling, like in big auditoriums and things like that. That's pretty cool. Bicycles, all
Yeah.
kinds of things, all kinds of restoration projects,
Mhm.
little red wagons, lawn furniture, all kinds of things.
Cool.
Anything that's metal.
Anything metal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But so powder coat only works with metal because you need an electrode on it to help
It
with
has
that
to be grounded
electrostatic
somehow.
process. Yeah. Yeah. So we can't powder coat any of the plastics or PVCs or any of that.
No, it cooks generally at about 350 to 400 degrees,
Right.
so no. But there are some things you can apply to get a ground to certain other types of objects. So there's some flexibility in that, but primarily it's metal.
You have to jump through some hoops.
Yes.
Got it. Cool. So if you happen to be in the Portland community, your reviews online are stunning.
Awesome.
So where can people find out more? What's for instance, your website? Your web
Yeah.
address?
Color Effects Powder Coating.
ColorFXPowdercoating.com.
Yep.
Beautiful. This is Bruce. You're awesome. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right. That was fun. Thanks.
Now he's spraying it on.
Oh, all right. So it doesn't have to be closed. Okay.
There's been no shortage of really enjoyable aspects of this project, but this right here was just one of the more satisfying parts of starting to see everything come back together. All these parts that we'd either been collecting or that in episode 1 of this project that we stripped all these parts off of the original donor trikes. Seeing those parts start to come back together and get installed on this shiny new frame that we've been obsessing over and laboring over. Here's just a quick flyover of all the pieces and parts and components that we're going to be installing over just the next few minutes here. So we'll start with the actual crankshaft. Followed closely by the crank arms, and one of which has the chain rings attached to it, right there. And I tried to leave as much put together as I could when I did the original disassembly, so yeah, the pedals are still attached. One less thing to do. There goes the front derailleur up front. There's some of the steering mechanism going on. Again, left as much pre-assembled as I could. Since I'm dismantling things that really don't need to be dismantled. I'd never torn a trike down to this degree, so I'm really happy that I remembered where everything goes. So the orange parts of the handlebars going on, I didn't have those powder coated, I just rattle canned those and somewhat randomly chose orange, but orange kind of caught on because you'll see later on I kind of carried that forward and did some other orange accents on this guy. Even see a black control cable there hanging off the brake lever. Well, eventually I went with orange control cables. So we've got the water bottle cage, that was quick and easy. That rear derailleur that we kept from one of the donor trikes. We've got bar end style shifters going on here. I think the TerraTrike originally had grip shift, but I had these on hand, and I kind of prefer these for a trike. So here's just one of the control cables going in. This one leads from that front shifter lever there on the right, all the way back to the rear derailleur to get us some shifting action happening on that back wheel. You've got encased cable, followed by a little bit of bare cable, followed by more of the same. All right, here's our first working component. We'll just tighten that guy down, and then off camera here, you don't see my hand on the shifter lever, just testing that all works. Trim the cable off and put a little cap on it to keep the cable from fraying. So recumbents have ridiculously long chains. This is one of two idlers that helps guide the chain all the way from the crank way up front, all the way to that back wheel. Recumbent chains are like 3 or 4 times as long as a standard bicycle chain. So we got wheels going on. Wheels was one of the things, front wheels was one of the things I couldn't salvage from the original trike. The axle diameters are different, so I had to buy new wheels. Oh well. I was able to reuse a lot, but some things I had to open my wallet for to bring this thing to life. And there's another example of some orange accents coming into play. I'd ended up rattle can painting the seat frame. So just some cheap dish soap from the dollar store. Get the inside of the grip well coated and it'll just squish right on. Then when that soap dries, it pretty much acts like glue. It makes them go on really easy. And we're laying out some of that monster chain, getting that thing ready to install. There's actually 2 idlers there. You can see one up front and one toward the rear to guide that chain from front to back. And here's one of the brake calipers going on. Okay, wait, hold it, stop the presses, stop the reassembly. Just when things were going so well, we have indeed hit a little bump in the road before we even got on the road, and it has to do with brakes. So let me take you in a little closer and we'll geek out for a minute about disc brakes. So you may recall this part of the trike frame is actually from ice, formerly trice. So this part is as well. But the disc brake calipers that we're using, these were actually salvaged from the TerraTrike. Now everything is fine and dandy here over on this side. Notice the entry point for the control cable. It points toward the rider and toward the controls. And again, that's not a problem on this side, but the difficulty is both brake calipers are identical. And so that becomes a problem when you come over here to the other side. Now, the hanger is still kind of pointing downward like we saw on the other side, but the problem is to get the business end of the brake caliper, the squeezy part that has to squeeze on the rotor, well, you're going to turn that around, and now look what happens. The entry point for the control cable, it's actually pointing away from the controls. So even if I did something really unwieldy looking with the cable routing, there's still a problem just with the geometry of the way that this is angled versus this bracket here. It just is canted all weird, and it ends up that the pads don't make much contact with the rotor, not enough to do any good. So now if you look at my wife's TerraTrike, and they solved this problem totally differently. Check it out. That hanger on this side is what you might call upside down. It's facing upward. So they can use any old matched pair of off-the-shelf brake calipers and have that cable end up pointing, point of entry for the cable pointing the direction that it's supposed to go. So after staring at this and scratching my head a little bit and doing a bit of research on the net, it turns out that there is actually such a thing as mirrored brake calipers, and they look like this. And so I'm going to have to order those, and well, they're kind of not cheap. And it only comes as a bundle with the brake calipers, rotors, and levers. So there's a bunch of parts that I actually don't actually need, because I've got rotors and I've got levers, but anyway, so there's no other way out other than to order those, because there's a limited number of places that actually make them. So far I've really only discovered one, and it's the same. It's still the same brand of caliper that ICE uses on some of their trikes today. The fully suspended ones, apparently, that have front suspension on both sides, still use those mirrored calipers. So thank God they're still made, because this particular frame is actually pretty old. So we'll need to order those, get brakes installed and cabled up, and then we'll get out there for a test ride. We're getting close. So as far as a test ride goes, it was kind of go big or go home. I actually didn't even take a test ride down the driveway. We had this camping trip coming up, and we wanted 2 functional trikes for the event. So Frankentrike, you've become familiar with during our video in bringing up the rear, and Renee gets the kind of a hand-me-down trike that was mine, that I set all up for her. She has a longer inseam, so there were some adjustments to be made. So again, aside from riding that, you got to ride yours down the driveway like 6-7 months ago, and we just haven't had time. So this is kind of your first outing, your first recumbent experience for all practical purposes. Yeah. What do you think?
Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah?
It's great, and especially on a trail like this. It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
So I have a convert?
Yes.
I've made a convert of you?
Yes.
From 2 wheels?
Yeah,
Nice.
from my mountain bike to this, I think.
Yeah, cool. So as far as Frankentrike, it's performing really, really well. I'm so ecstatic to have this project come together. I did have 2 little issues. So one was just mechanic error. Well, they're both kind of mechanic error, because let's face it, that's been the focus of the project, is me pretending to be a bike mechanic. So on this left derailleur over there, the left shifter, I pushed it all the way forward and I got up to the largest sprocket, but I wasn't able to shift back down. So then the other thing that happened was I was pedaling really hard to get out of some grass, and then my whole pedal boom assembly like went wonk and tilted to the side. And so there's a pair of bolts that just sort of pinch part of the frame so that doesn't move forward or back, or supposedly doesn't rotate either. But again, mechanic error on my part. So after the thing gets powder coated, it goes through that oven like we saw, and the metal was just bone dry. So I added some grease, which helps, for adjustability, but I think I overdid it. And there's so much grease in there that it's slipperier than it really needs to be. You want some grease on the exposed part to keep it from rusting. But yeah, I overdid it. I managed to, I brought enough tools with us on the trail that I was able to kind of loosen those bolts, right it again, and crank down on it. I've just been going gentle with it. But ultimately I want to take that all apart and remove some of the excess, and I think we'll be good to go. This is Shakedown Cruise number 2. We are on the Row River Trail, super similar to where we were before, one of those rails to trails conversion type things. We've got this fantastic black-topped, forested in, right alongside our lake. Is this Dorina Lake, I think? Yeah, we're camping about 45 minutes away from here. It's just been a beautiful day so far. It's starting to get a little bit overcast, so we're starting to go like, we ought to hightail it back to the truck. But anyway, Shakedown Cruise number 2. I feel like we've got all the kinks worked out. All the shifting works. I've actually got 2 functioning brakes now, so hey, I can stop, which is awesome. Really am enjoying being able to ride with my wife. We both now have bikes that we really like and look forward to riding. So I'm hoping that with the advent of Frankentrike, and then Renee now getting my hand-me-down trike, that this will be just a boon to our overall fitness, because we want to keep riding, we want to keep doing this. So even though I actually put hundreds into this restoration, I still feel like I got a good deal, because these things actually go for thousands. If you wanted to buy a recumbent trike new, you can very easily spend $2,000 up to $5,000. Now you're probably start getting into the e-assisted models at that point, but maybe not. There's some of them that are even still just pedal trikes that are quite expensive. So even though that's the case, if this video has gotten you interested in recumbents or recumbent trikes specifically, just some of the major brands that are out there you've heard kicking around during this video, Trike and Ice are a couple of very well-known, well-respected brands. Cat Trike is another one. There's probably 4 or 5 others that are escaping me at the moment, but if this is something that has sparked your interest, if you just pick your favorite search engine and enter recumbent trike, you'll find some more information. So thanks for joining us on He Said, She Said, and we've been enjoying the ride, quite literally. Hope you enjoyed the ride of seeing Frankentrike comes together. I enjoyed like adding the little field trips and going out and about, something different in terms of video format from what we've done. Renee was watching one of my early edits and said, hey, it's like that How It's Made show on cable or whatever it is. So anyway, enjoy putting this together. Always enjoy hanging out with you guys, and we'll see you real soon on the next one. Take care of each other.